Okay, so we're on to the final panel, which is on the future of creativity. And for this, I'd like to ask our 5 Nobel laureates to come on stage, please. Carl, yeah. Michael. Randy in the middle. Edvard and May-Britt. We don't know. We were discussing earlier whether it's good to seat the husband and wife team together or separated. We didn't know, so we just went for together. So I think everybody knows everybody, but just in case, Carl Wieman, Michael Levitt, Randy Schekman, Edvard Moser, May-Britt Moser. Since we had this critical mass of Nobel laureates present, we thought it would be good to explore the theme of creativity, just raised in the last panel, especially by Olafur. And we might start by asking what we mean by creativity. So, Randy, what do you think of when you think of creativity?
I guess when I think of creativity, it's the ability or the chance to put 2 or more seemingly disparate observations or ideas together in an unexpected combination to yield some novel insight that you couldn't have imagined. And I'm reminded of this by the wonderful book by François Jacob called The Statue Within, in which he described the 2 kinds of science. One was daytime science and the other was nighttime science. Daytime science was to him the usual observations and ideas that come together that are logical. Nighttime science, on the other hand, was this rare combination of things that could not be anticipated.
Very nice. Michael.
You know, the obvious definitions are that you find something that was unexpected and is useful. But I would say it's the aha moment that you get while you're having a shower. It's not what you think.
May-Britt?
Creativity. So of course I agree with these people, but I think going back to science, where I like to be, then you become creative if you have the ability to listen to other people that have different views from yourself, but don't throw the baby out with the water. So you have to keep something for yourself and then select what is good and what is not so good from what other people try to tell you. And then you should be able to see the pattern that is coming in front of your eyes. But you can talk about the same thing in music. We come from Trondheim, which is the town for jazz. And jazz is to put different pieces of music together that wasn't combined before. But you can't do that if you haven't played beautiful music. So you need something there, and then, as you say, combine it in new ways.
I think we should get everyone's comments on this. So, Edvard?
Somewhat similar. I think it's about putting together pieces of information that your brain has collected over long times, which haven't been seen together before, and using that to solve some, either solve a problem or just create an insight. So I think it's somewhat like dreaming, where this happens too. I mean, random pieces of information occur together. Sometimes that even leads to a new insight.
Yeah, Kekulé's benzene ringen. Yeah. Carl?
So naturally, when I was thinking about teaching and learning, studying this, spent quite a bit of time thinking about it, and I think it's within. It always really has to be within the context of kind of an existing issue or question, and so it's very much. And scientific creativity is very much residing in a discipline and kind of all the things you know about it. But it's then coming, as other people have said, sort of recognizing a different pattern or some new information from somewhere else that's relevant. Really just, and what the real test is, it's things that turn out to be useful that other people haven't seen yet or recognized yet. And I'll just put in one little plug that what we came to recognize was the educational system really teaches anti-creativity, because it's really about, teachers are giving students problems to solve, and the goal is to have an answer that looks like what the teacher was looking for, and that's exactly not being creative. And so when we tried to experiments of giving problems that didn't have answers the teachers were looking for, the students actually perform much more creatively on further tasks.
Sure. But as you and others are pointing out, there needs to be a foundational base.
Absolutely, yes.
Fine. So 70% of the audience, or the audience responders we gathered, are positive about the idea that we will be more creative in 30 years, that humans will be. They either think it's likely or extremely likely. Do you think that's the case? Edvard?
I think we'll be creative in a different way. You didn't have a box for that, apparently. So I think it's not more or less, but we will interact much more with the computers and use information that can pop up within milliseconds. Of course, that will make us think and act in a different way. But I think it's not a more or less question.
But that's how. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's how nature works too, because not creativity that has a positive allure for us, but nature is filled with mutations, and that is how we get variation, and we get new species, we get new behavior. So we need this variation, and of course for us to be creative, then it's more positive that we think that we see things in a better way and we're smarter.
Randy?
Well, one of the trends in the life sciences, and I think probably in all science, is the need to collaborate across lines. People who bring different technologies to bear on a problem, and that will reinforce the creative experience, because you will have to deal with other people who have very different perspective, and if it's an effective team effort, then I think there will be some creative tension that arises from that collaboration.
I would say almost certainly yes, and it goes down to the definitions that have been given before, that creativity involves interaction of several things. The world is becoming a much more interactive place, and people who were unempowered can now go online and often do some really creative things. So I think that the creativity divided by the population is going to increase enormously.
Of the population, okay. Do you find that in your own life, technology makes you more creative?
It's hard, because as you get older, you're losing neurons all the time, and it's not clear that maybe it makes you stay more or less the same. I guess there's one interesting thing, and that is as you get older, well, normally in life, it's much easier to do something you know how to do than to do something new. But when you have no memory, there's nothing that you actually make it easier. So actually, everything's about the same.
Yeah, Randy, I've heard you say some things about people who are older scientists who say they're doing the best work of their career before you. You're a bit scathing about that.
Well, I'm a little worried about that. I've told my friends that if I ever, at this point, for the rest of my life, say that I'm doing the best work of my life, then it is a sure sign of senility and delusion. I feel that I did my best work when I was 30 years old. Because I had no preconceived notions about the field. I had no prejudices built up over many decades, and I could do something that other people thought was crazy and feel good about it.
Edvard, then May-Britt.
Well, about being creative, I still think I'm creative. I think there are some advantages of getting older too.
You're doing the best work of your life.
There's an advantage of getting older, is that you accumulate more and more of these random information. You get more and more exposed to knowledge outside your own field, something that is quite often not the case for young people when they start in a difficult field. So it's in a different way. So I don't think I'm done yet.
Yeah. No, so I just want to reflect also on what is stopping creativity, and that is fear. And you can get fear, of course, if people tell you that you're stupid, you shouldn't think about these topics, or you shouldn't think along these lines. But also fear that you don't have the methods or the techniques to address your question. And that has happened now in neuroscience, that we have got all these wonderful, wonderful techniques, so that we are much tougher than when we were young to address questions that we couldn't try even to think of addressing earlier. For example, with optogenetics or all these new techniques that we can use. And then we are so creative.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Carmen and Michael, sorry.
I tend to think, I don't think the biggest barrier is fear. I think the biggest barrier is habits, and you just get deeper and deeper into those as you get old, and so you're not going to be as creative.
So I just wanted to follow up on what Randy said. I think I did my best work when I was like 21 years old, and I knew nothing. And what really worries me today is that people become independent when they know too much. They've already done a 6-year PhD and a 6-year postdoc. They are too old. And I really believe that there's something really wrong with the system. So I think when I talk about creativity, I think the world is going to be more creative. I actually think that science, per dollar spent, is going to become less creative.
I have exactly that worry.
And it's because people are just too long in the training.
The whole system has become... People have... Okay, when you're older, so for me right now, 64 is super young, right? But, you know, people have forgotten that there's an absolute youngness. 40 is not the new 20. 20 is the new 20. And we're making a huge mistake because we sort of say, well, science is so complicated, then you should learn all these new things. And it's basically just a way to have, you know, really good labor in your lab doing things for you. And it's a huge mistake. I think the system is really rotten for this reason. I think, so my generation, baby boomer generation, were lucky because when people older than us were sort of taken out of the system by the Great Depression and the Second World War. Unfortunately, people young growing up now still have us clogging up the whole system. So I don't know, I'm worried from that point of view.
I share all of those concerns. On the other hand, our work shows that you can teach people to be much more creative. I mean, you know, if you actually set about actively doing that, and probably at any age, although we haven't tested that.
May-Britt,
No, so in our field, we don't have this Einsteins, at least not myself, but I work in a group. And I depend on all these beautiful young people in our lab, and we are facilitating creativity in our lab by having an environment where you are allowed to ask questions and you are forced to ask questions, and then it's a brainstorming which creates creativity. And I find it so fascinating. So when we have meetings with our people, I'm so happy, and passion makes creativity.
Is there almost a kind of conflict, though, between the collaboration that Randy mentioned, for instance, that you need, the meeting of ideas to be creative, but also the kind of being on your own and fresh and sort of solo that you were when you were doing your best work, maybe, and you were, Michael, when you were doing your work at 21. I mean, almost there's a conflict between the need to collaborate and the need to be an individual.
But some problems now are so complicated that they require different technologies for progress. So you are forced, I think, not in a bad way, but forced to reach out to collaborate with people who have a technique that you can't easily apply. And I think that from that can come some creative tension, as long as the two, as the collaborators are open and share everything and are willing to consider alternatives.
Michael?
I think a key thing here is, certainly when I was a young scientist, people's PhD supervisors did not expect the names to be on your papers. Max Perutz was Francis Crick's PhD supervisor, and it's not Perutz, Watson, and Crick. And it was never expected that it would be. And I think that people, you know, in science, the reward for working so hard is recognition. And I think that it's great to work with young people, but I think today we're not giving them anything like the opportunities that we had when we were that age. And I think it's a problem.
Did you want to say something, Edvard?
Yeah, I just wanted to add about your question about collaboration versus actually being alone. I think the latter is also important. I notice with myself that some of the times when I'm most creative is when I'm sitting on an airplane, and one without Wi-Fi, just sitting there for 8 hours, doing nothing. And then things pop up randomly, and I get the idea for a new experiment that I would never have got at home, because there's so much going on all the time. So I think these moments of just sitting there, having nothing to do, it's so important, and it's so easy to lose in the times when, especially people like we, are nagged all the time to do things.
And that's one aspect of information technology really hinders creativity, because you just don't get those times of not being accessible, not being interrupted.
So you need time to yourself, and perhaps elevated CO2 levels too. But so that touches on something that a member of the audience, Jefferson, has asked, which is, speaking about creativity, how much did creativity contribute to your own success in becoming a Nobel laureate? Was it all creativity? Was it a lot of hard work as well? I don't know. Who wants to answer that? Would you like to?
Yeah, I would say that creativity is important, but I think there's an awful lot of luck. And one ends up being where one is because of other people's decisions that you didn't even understand at the time. Hard work is also very important. I think you'll notice that almost all successful scientists have a lot of stamina. And that kind of energy to just keep on going is really important. But I think creativity in some ways is the drug that drives us. I mean, when you have an idea that it's a high that if I could buy it, I would. It's just amazing, and it doesn't have to be a big. It's not like, oh, I just solved how the universe works. It could just be, oh, I suddenly realized one of my experiments going wrong for 2 weeks. It's an amazing feeling, and it doesn't actually come. I've often thought, well, where does creativity come from? And you don't sit down with a list and say in the morning, potential good ideas for today. No, and a bad one. It's usually when you're doing something different. You're out for a walk, you're with the dog, in an aeroplane. I guess it doesn't work for me. Having a shower, something that kind of, So I think the worst invention is going to be a waterproof iPhone.
So I'll just put in a counter to that. I mean, for me, the things that I, got most successful was, I picked some area that seemed like it was going to be potentially important, and I spent years plodding away at it. And at some point, there was some big challenge, and I just, thought, oh, well, this is the way to tackle it. I wonder why nobody else is working on it this way. So I never got these great inspirations. For me, it was always, I wonder why nobody else thought to do it this way. And just but there was a whole lot of work to set that up. Yeah, I wish I got these things I could get excited in the shower about. But
so we've just got a minute left, and I guess forgive me for asking this question, but it's sort of, I think we probably have to ask it at this meeting. Can you foresee a day when you're sitting here or others are sitting here in your place and one of you is a machine? Will there be a machine that can be awarded a Nobel Prize? Go on, go for it.
So I would say no, because I go back to the original claim I made, is creativity is looking at things in some basically different way than people have before. Machines are taught how to look at things. It's built into them, and so there's sort of, it's going to be a vastly different machine than anything we're thinking of now, where we build in rules, because you follow those rules, it's not going to be creative.
Michael?
Yeah, I have no problem thinking about that. I think it would also be, great for publicity. It has to be a real machine, not...
Even better than Frank Wilczek on a...
No, he already has one. So.
Anyone else want to try that one?
Well, I would never say never, but I don't think in my lifetime that I'll see a machine up here answering that question. I watched, Watson play Jeopardy and marveled at the ability of the computer to recall rare information, but putting unexpected things together in the way that generates the creative idea, I think is that for the time being, not something that I'm going to see in a machine.
Okay, thank you all very much. Yeah, do you want to?
I think maybe when the unexpected happens, then we will notice the difference. I think a machine can be taught to do the most incredible things, including being creative in a way, if you prescribe the rules for creativity, which we have talked about today. So we can make a machine actually be creative within certain limits, but then something happens that is not in the rules, and then we'll see the difference.
Indeed. Everyone else has had a word. Last word to you, May-Britt.
No, I just want to say what is so fantastic by being a scientist. It's all the passion by seeing things that we haven't seen before. And that a machine can't.
That's a nice place to end. Let's have a round of applause for human passion and creativity. So thank you all, and that unfortunately is it for the day. We're out of time, so I'd just like to thank you all for being here for what's been a really splendid day. We've enjoyed it tremendously, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 9th of December in Stockholm next year.